The air inside the departures terminal at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was thick with the scent of roasted espresso and the buzzing excitement of an upcoming getaway. I stood near Gate S9, surrounded by the lively chatter of my 17 relatives. My nieces and nephews were laughing, their oversized luggage piled high, while my sister Martha adjusted her sun hat. At 68, the $120,000 I had spent to charter this grand Hawaiian family reunion was the ultimate labor of love. It was meant to celebrate the cherished memory of my late husband, Arthur, and to gather our family close while my health and energy still allowed me to travel the world. With a deep, contented breath, I reached into my leather travel wallet, pulled out the group confirmation folder, and handed it to my son, David. He had graciously volunteered to handle the final group check-in at the counter. Yet, instead of taking the folder with his usual ease, David froze. He stared intently at the polished marble floor, repeatedly shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Before I could ask what was wrong, his wife, Rachel, stepped cleanly between us. Wearing a crisp, tailored cream linen suit and a tight, rehearsed corporate smile, she placed her hand flat on the ticketing counter and looked me dead in the eye. "There's no ticket for you, Evelyn." "You need to go home," Rachel stated, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper so the rest of our family buzzing nearby wouldn't hear. I blinked, the ambient roar of the bustling airport suddenly fading into a distant, muffled hum. "Excuse me, you've been so terribly tired lately, Evelyn," Rachel continued, her tone dripping with patronizing faux concern. David and I discussed it at length, and we decided the long 5-hour flight to Honolulu would simply be too much for your frail health. We canceled your seat. Terrence is already waiting outside in a black sedan to drive you back to our house in Bellevue. I turned my gaze to my son. "David. You canceled the ticket that I paid for." He finally glanced up, his face flushed bright crimson. "Mom, please, don't make a scene here, it's truly for the best. The family is already moving toward the security checkpoint. Just go." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. At 68 years old, having survived the loss of my husband and decades of life's unpredictable storms, I knew a manufactured crisis when I saw one. I looked past Rachel toward the airline agent behind the counter, who awkwardly averted her eyes, silently confirming that my seat had indeed been scrubbed from the system using coordinator access. Slowly, deliberately, I zipped my leather purse. "All right," I replied, my voice remarkably steady. "Have a safe flight." Without another word, I turned my back on them and walked away toward the exit. I didn't yet know the full, sinister reason why they needed me gone so desperately. But as I stepped through the sliding glass doors into the bright Seattle morning sun, I promised myself I would find out the absolute truth long before their flight ever touched down in Oahu. The sprawling house in Bellevue felt entirely too large when I walked through the front door. The silence was heavy, pressing against my ears. I set my rolling suitcase by the grand staircase and walked straight into the kitchen to put the kettle on. I needed a clear, razor-sharp head, not useless tears. Crying wouldn't recover my hard-earned money, nor would it explain why my only son had just heartlessly stranded his mother at a crowded airport. David had spent the last 2 weeks using our home guest room as his operational command center to plan this grand Hawaiian excursion. He was supposed to be finalizing local excursions, luxury transport, and 5-star dinner reservations. Moving quietly down the carpeted hallway, I pushed the guest room door open. He had taken his primary corporate laptop with him, of course, but in his characteristic carelessness, he had left our old desktop computer powered on, sitting wide awake on the wooden desk. I sat down in the leather desk chair and jiggled the mouse. The screen woke instantly. He had left his cloud storage account logged right into the browser. I wasn't looking to invade his personal secrets. I merely wanted to check the original travel itinerary to see what else he had altered. Instead, a prominent folder sitting right on the desktop caught my eye. It was labeled, Pine Lake Redevelopment Pitch Presentation. My breath hitched in my throat. Pine Lake was the idyllic lakefront cabin property my husband and I had bought 40 years ago in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, just a couple of hours outside Seattle. It belonged entirely to my name, though I had graciously let David manage the seasonal Airbnb rentals for the past 2 years to help him earn extra supplemental income. My trembling hand clicked the folder open. Inside were professional architectural renderings, a VIP guest list for a private investor dinner in Honolulu, and a master document titled Pitch Notes. I began to read, horror washing over me sentence by sentence. The entire trip was never a family reunion at all. David and Rachel had secretly invited 3 major real estate developers, based out of California, to the luxury resort. They were using my $120,000 family vacation as a lavish, prosperous backdrop to pitch the complete corporate buyout and sale of Pine Lake. And right there, typed in Rachel's neat digital handwriting, was a chilling note. Make certain Evelyn is not present. She will sentimentalize the property and veto the sale. Handle her quietly at the airport. They hadn't left me behind out of concern for my health. They simply needed me out of the way so I couldn't protect my own legacy. I scrolled rapidly through the presentation slides, my jaw tightening with every click. They had rebranded my quiet, rustic lakeside retreat into the Pine Lake Luxury Executive Village. Rachel had even drafted sweeping architectural floor plans for tearing down the hand-built cabin my husband constructed with his own 2 hands, replacing it with 6 sterile, ultramodern rental townhomes. The strategy was brutally clear and manipulative. By hosting these high-net-worth developers at a 5-star Hawaiian resort, surrounded by a seemingly prosperous, united, and joyful family, David wanted to project immense wealth, stability, and corporate control. He planned to convince the investors that the entire Dixon family was fully on board, and that my signature on the official deed transfer was merely a formality waiting back home. He was literally using my own money to fund the elaborate illusion of his corporate success. I leaned back slowly in the desk chair and looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. A deep, cold, quiet anger settled into my chest. I didn't feel broken or frail. I felt dangerously focused. David had always been easily swayed by Rachel's boundless, toxic ambitions. She loved expensive European cars, high-end fashion, and country club memberships, and David utterly hated saying no to her. But this egregious scheme crossed a definitive line from passive familial greed into active, calculated theft. They truly expected me to sit right here in my empty house, weeping over a missed flight, too embarrassed and intimidated to tell anyone what had happened. They expected me to play the part of the confused, aging widow they had so easily described to the airline gate agent. I picked up my reading glasses from the desk, cleaned them carefully on my wool sweater, and slid them onto my face. "You want to play high-stakes business, David," I muttered softly to the empty room. "Let's play business." I didn't need a high-priced attorney to tell me what legally belonged to me. I didn't need the police. I just needed my master banking login and the direct telephone number for the Diamond Head Resort in Honolulu. They had meticulously scheduled my removal from the trip, but they had completely forgotten one crucial administrative detail. My name remained the primary authority on all master accounts. I walked over to my own laptop at the kitchen table. First, I logged securely into my primary banking portal. David had 2 secondary credit cards attached directly to my master account, one designated for his personal travel emergencies and another to manage the Pine Lake operational expenses. I didn't hesitate. I clicked the small toggle switch next to both active card numbers. Status: deactivated. Next, I opened my hospitality ledger for the resort. I had personally wired a massive sum directly to the hotel upfront to cover the family's daily dining, luxury excursions, and incidentals. I picked up my smartphone and dialed the front desk in Honolulu directly. "Aloha, thank you for calling the Diamond Head Resort Concierge Desk. How may I assist you today?" a crisp, professional voice answered. "Hello, this is Evelyn Dixon. I am the primary financier and account holder for the Dixon family group arriving today," I said, keeping my voice impeccably even and pleasant. Ah, yes, Mrs. Dixon. We have your large party checking into their suites shortly. Excellent. I need to make an immediate adjustment to our account parameters, I instructed smoothly. Please restrict the master hospitality ledger to standard family events and dining only. Cancel the private executive dining room reserved for tomorrow night, and immediately reverse and refund the $5,000 deposit back to my original payment card. Furthermore, no guest is authorized to charge any luxury amenities, spa packages, or private events to my MasterCard without my explicit verbal consent. The concierge paused, the sound of rapid typing echoing through the line. Understood, Mrs. Dixon. The private executive dinner is canceled, and the funds are being returned to your primary account immediately. Shall I notify Mr. David Dixon of these adjustments? There is no need, I replied calmly. He will find out soon enough. I thanked the agent, hung up the phone, and took a slow, grounding breath. I walked over to the kitchen counter and brewed a fresh pot of dark roast coffee. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't shaking. Instead, I felt a profound, liberating wave of relief. For years, I had quietly funded their lavish lifestyle, ignoring the blatant disrespect and subtle slights, simply because I wanted to keep superficial family peace. By telling me to go home at the airport, Rachel had finally given me the absolute permission I needed to slam my wallet shut forever. I poured my coffee, stepped out onto the back porch, and waited for their flight to land across the Pacific. The text message buzzed loudly against the wooden patio table at 4:15 p.m. local time. It was from David. Mom, there's a serious problem with the MasterCard at the hotel. The front desk is saying the investor dinner is completely canceled and the deposit is gone. Call the bank immediately. Rachel is freaking out. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I typed my response with meticulous slowness. David, there is no problem with the bank. I canceled the dinner myself. Since you canceled my plane ticket, I assumed my money was no longer needed for your business ventures. 3 seconds later, my phone began ringing incessantly. It was David, but when I swiped to answer, Rachel's shrill, panicked voice exploded through the speaker. Evelyn, what on earth do you think you're doing? She demanded. The fake, sweet hospitality completely vanished. We have highly important, influential people arriving tomorrow morning. You are going to utterly ruin David's biggest career deal. Rachel, I said calmly, cutting cleanly through her rising panic. You are standing in a luxury resort hotel that I paid for, eating food that I bought. You do not get to steal my vacation plans, to sell my family home behind my back, and then expect me to finance your corporate pitch. The dinner is permanently off. You went snooping through our private things, she shrieked hysterically. I looked at an open computer sitting in my own house, I corrected coldly. If you want to host real estate developers, you can pay for it with your own credit card. Oh wait. I just deactivated those 2 cards as well. Mom, please. David's desperate voice broke into the background, sounding pathetic and cornered. We need this deal to close. Just turn the card back on. We'll explain everything when we get back home to Seattle. There is nothing left to explain, David, I replied firmly. You made your definitive choice at the airport terminal. Have a nice vacation. I pressed the end button. The phone buzzed immediately with a flurry of angry text messages. I silenced the ringer entirely and flipped the phone face down on the table. They were 6,000 miles away, entirely cut off from my financial lifeline and rapidly spiraling into panic. I had taken back the reins of my life, and I hadn't even needed to raise my voice. The next morning, I drove 45 minutes out of the city toward Pine Lake. The autumn air was crisp, and the deep blue water of the lake sparkled brilliantly through the tall pine trees. This sacred place held 30 years of my most cherished memories with Arthur, and the mere thought of David turning it into a sterile concrete development site turned my stomach. I pulled my car into the gravel driveway. Because David managed the property rentals, he held a master set of physical keys and unrestricted access. That dangerous privilege ended today. I had scheduled a trusted local locksmith, a kind and reliable man named Bill, to meet me at the property. He arrived right on schedule in his marked van. "Morning, Mrs. Dixon," Bill greeted me cheerfully, grabbing his heavy tool belt. "Ready to swap out the cylinders." "Every single lock, Bill," I said firmly. Front door, back door, the boathouse shed, and the detached garage. While Bill went to work with his drill, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Rachel had clearly been staging the cabin for her wealthy guests. She had removed Arthur's comfortable, worn leather armchair by the stone fireplace, replacing it with a rigid, modern Scandinavian sofa, and covered our rustic oak dining table with glossy, full-color investor brochures. I grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag from the kitchen pantry and swept every single brochure off the table. I dragged her pretentious staging furniture out through the back door and loaded it neatly into the garage. I didn't damage a single item, but I certainly wasn't going to let her corporate staging pollute my living room. I retrieved Arthur's old armchair from storage and placed it right back where it belonged, beside the hearth. By noon, Bill wiped his hands and handed me a shiny new set of brass keys. "All done, ma'am. Not a single old key will turn in these cylinders anymore." I paid him generously and locked the heavy wooden door securely behind him. Slipping the new keys into my purse, the physical weight of them felt deeply satisfying. David had an investor scheduled for a private site walkthrough next week when he returned. Let him try to show a property he couldn't even physically enter. True ownership wasn't just a name on a piece of paper. It was the cold metal key resting safely at the bottom of my bag. When I finally turned my phone's ringer back on later that afternoon, I had 14 missed calls. I calmly answered the 15th. "Mom," David practically yelled into the receiver. "The investors just walked out of our meeting. We couldn't secure the private room, so Rachel tried to pitch them right in the crowded hotel lobby. They laughed right in our faces." "You humiliated us. You humiliated yourself, David," I answered steadily, dusting off a framed photograph of Arthur on the cabin mantel. "You built an entire house of cards using my money." Rachel is in absolute tears. She posted a public statement on Facebook claiming you're having a severe mental health breakdown to explain to our friends why you aren't even here. I stopped dusting. She can post whatever comforting lies she likes. Anyone who truly matters knows the exact truth. "What am I supposed to do now?" he pleaded, his voice shifting rapidly into his usual passive whining. "We have the formal site tour at Pine Lake next Wednesday. You have to let us use the cabin." "No," I said simply. "I changed all the locks today, David. Your staging furniture has been boxed and moved to the garage. You no longer manage this property. I am hiring a professional local management company on Monday morning." Dead silence stretched across the line for several seconds. You changed the locks," he whispered in disbelief. "And I'm currently boxing up the rest of the personal belongings you and Rachel left in my attic," I added. "I expect you to pick them up immediately when you return from Hawaii. Do not use your old key to enter my house. You will knock like everyone else. Mom, you can't do this to us. You're punishing us just for trying to build a future." "I am stopping you from stealing mine," I replied coldly. "Enjoy the beach." I hung up the phone without waiting for a rebuttal. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. For years, I had smoothed over David's endless mistakes and tolerated Rachel's passive-aggressive insults because they were family. But a boundary is only real when you actively enforce it. I walked out of the cabin, double-checked the new deadbolt, and drove back to the city. That evening, my phone rang again. This time, it was my sister Martha calling directly from Maui. "Samantha," Martha began, her voice tight and controlled. "David just told the entire family that you had a sudden dizzy spell at the airport, and your doctor strictly forbade you from flying. He said you were resting quietly at home." "I am perfectly healthy, Martha," I replied. "David and Rachel deliberately canceled my ticket so they could bring real estate developers to the resort." Martha gasped loudly. "What? Why on earth would they do something so vile?" I gave her the short, unvarnished truth. I told her about the Pine Lake presentation folder, the investors, and the canceled private dinner. I didn't exaggerate or cry, I simply laid out the factual reality. I knew something felt terribly off, Martha muttered angrily. Rachel has been running around the resort snapping at everyone, trying to force us all into matching tropical shirts for a corporate photo shoot. But when we got to the upscale restaurant last night, her credit cards were completely declined. I cut off the funding for all their business events, I explained. However, the rest of the family vacation is fully and permanently paid for. Enjoy the luau, order room service, go snorkeling and relax. You don't have to play unpaid extras in Rachel's commercial anymore. Oh, we certainly won't, Martha said, her tone turning brightly triumphant. I'll let the rest of the family know right now. We are going to have a wonderful, peaceful time, Sammy. Don't you worry about a thing. By the next morning, I saw the wonderful results playing out across social media. My nieces and nephews were posting candid, beautiful photos from the beach, laughing, swimming, and holding tropical drinks. David and Rachel were completely absent from every single picture. The family had simply walked away from their controlling grip, enjoying the vacation I had generously bought for them without the corporate drama. They returned from Hawaii 3 days early. I knew they would. Without wealthy investors to impress, and with the entire family actively icing them out at the resort, there was zero reason for them to stay. I was sitting comfortably in my living room reading a hardcover book when I heard a car door slam aggressively in the driveway. Heavy, hurried footsteps stomped up the front porch stairs. Then came the exact sound I had been anticipating, the metallic scraping of a key sliding into the front door lock, followed by a frustrated, violent jiggle. I had hired Bill the locksmith to update the main house locks just 2 days prior. The old key didn't turn. The brass doorknob rattled furiously. Mom. Open this door right now, David yelled from the porch. I placed my fabric bookmark carefully between the pages, stood up, and smoothed my wool sweater. I unlocked the door from the inside, stepped out onto the porch, and pulled the door firmly shut behind me until it clicked securely. David looked exhausted, severely sunburned, and incandescent with rage. Rachel stood directly behind him, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, glaring daggers at me. Why isn't my key working? David demanded, stepping toward me. Because you don't live here anymore, I stated calmly. I gestured toward the 2 large cardboard boxes, resting neatly on the porch bench. Those are the rest of your personal belongings from the guest room and the attic. Rachel scoffed bitterly, stepping forward. You are acting like an absolute child, Samantha. Overreacting over nothing, and deeply embarrassing us in front of the entire family. I turned my steady gaze directly to her. I didn't leave you stranded at an airport, Rachel. I didn't forge secret pitch notes to steal my home. You catastrophically overplayed your hand. Now you need to leave my porch. Mom, David stepped forward, his tone shifting back to that familiar, pathetic whining cadence. We can fix this, just let us inside to talk. We need that Pine Lake rental income for our mortgage payments. I shook my head slowly. The conversation is permanently over, David. You can't just cut us off like this, Rachel snapped, dropping her composed corporate act entirely. We're your family. Family respects and protects each other, Rachel, I replied, looking right into her eyes. You viewed me as an inconvenient obstacle to my own bank account. You treated me like a burdensome invalid when it suited your schedule, and a bottomless wallet when you needed cash. That ends today. David looked down at the packed cardboard boxes on the bench, then back at the securely locked front door, finally realizing that his mother wasn't going to cave in. His usual manipulative tactics of waiting for me to soften simply weren't going to work. There was no argument left to win because I wasn't fighting. I was simply stating the irrevocable new reality of my life. Take your boxes, I said softly. Do not come back until you are ready to offer a sincere, unconditional apology. And even then, understand that my finances are never again going to be your business. David reached out and picked up the boxes, his shoulders heavily slumped in defeat. He walked back to their sedan without uttering another word. Rachel hesitated for a long moment, opening her mouth to hurl one final vicious insult, but she caught the unwavering look in my eyes and thought better of it. She spun around on her heel and marched angrily down the driveway. I watched their car back out of the driveway and drive away down the street. I didn't feel a sudden pang of sadness, nor did I wish for a dramatic reconciliation. I felt entirely light, untethered, and free. I turned around, used my new brass key to unlock my front door, and stepped back into my quiet, peaceful, beautiful home. The following week, I officially finalized the contract with the professional property management agency for Pine Lake. Then, I booked myself a quiet, restorative week-long cabin retreat in the mountains. Just me, a towering stack of good books, a warm cup of tea, and the absolute, unwavering certainty that my life, my home, and my peace belonged entirely to me once more. What Samantha's story reminds us of is that setting firm boundaries isn't about punishing the people around you, it is about fiercely protecting your own peace. Too often, we let small disrespects slide because we want to maintain superficial family harmony, confusing patience with permission. But true respect always starts with the limits we draw for ourselves. When you stop funding behavior that undermines your dignity and take back complete control of your life, you realize you don't need a courtroom or a dramatic shouting match to win back your peace. Sometimes, the quietest actions speak the loudest,